In this video lecture, we are going to understand about monopolistic competition. Now you saw something called perfect competition. And a monopoly in some of the previous videos. A perfect competition wherein you have infinite number of buyers and sellers. Okay. A monopoly wherein you have a single or a cartel of sellers. Between these two forms, there are another two set of forms which lie. One is known as monopolistic competition, and the other one is known as oligopoly. This we are going to see separately. Let us now concentrate on monopolistic competition. Now, a monopolistic competition is a situation wherein you have many firms. Okay? It's not infinite, but there are many firms who are selling differentiated products. Now, the first characteristic of a monopolistic competition is that there are many firms, right? So there is no single firm who is dominating, as in the case of a monopoly. At the same time, there are not infinite number of firms as is there in case of perfect competition. Okay? The firms are selling differentiated products. Now let's talk about automobiles. Okay? And amongst automobiles, let's take cars. Now there are so many worldwide players who manufacture different sets of cars. Let's call them brand A, brand B, and brand C. Okay? Each one of them is selling the cars, but they try to differentiate their own product. How? Someone will say, we have a rear mirror. Okay? Someone will say, we have seat cushions. Okay? Someone will say, we have engine whose horsepower is, let's say, 1800 cc. Okay? Someone will say, okay, our car provides a very high mileage. Right? So all of them are selling some products, which is cars within the automobiles industry, but they try to differentiate each of their products on the basis of certain characteristics. Right? So in order to differentiate their products, they will be incurring selling and advertising cost, trying to differentiate their products from each other. Right? Now, in case of a monopolistic competition situation, there are very few barriers to entry or exit. So let's say tomorrow you get $1 million. Actually, 1 million is too small an amount. Let's say you get $1 billion. Okay? And you want to start manufacturing cars. Go ahead, nothing stops you. Except for the fact that you may require this much of financing, which may be an issue. There's no restriction for you to start manufacturing cars. So there are very few barriers to entry. Anyone who is willing to get into this business can get in. Similarly, there are very few barriers to exit. So if a particular car manufacturer feels, no, this is not the market meant for me, and I want to move out, he can very well shut down and go out. Okay? And one of the other characteristics is that in terms of the knowledge both for the buyer and the seller is limited. Okay? No buyer is likely to have knowledge about all the cars in the market for each and every feature. Similarly, no seller can estimate as to what are the preferences in choices of the buyer. And therefore, advertising is something which is very crucial in case of monopolistic competition society. Because advertising creates the awareness for the buyer and differentiates the product. So to an extent, let's say for example, in India, we are currently more of a monopolistic competition insofar as automobile industry is concerned. I took this example because this is quite relevant in our case. We have so many of automobile manufacturers for car who try and differentiate each of their products. And leave alone car, I mean even in bikes if you see, although two or three of the major players are capturing the entire market, but there are no entry barriers, no exit barriers. People try to differentiate. Our bike is this many cc. Our bike is this many cc, right? So these are the these are the characteristics of a monopolistic competition. Oligopoly. Let us today understand what is the meaning of oligopoly. Now, every country, every economy will have certain industries, right? Let's take the case of telecom. Now, in these industries, if there are only few dominant players, who control the major part of the market, okay? So what happens here is that there are few dominant players, just like in India, you know that in telecom sector, there are only few major players, right? And they control the major share of the Indian market in their telecom market. That market condition is known as oligopoly. So in a particular industry, there are only few dominant players, and these dominant players control the major share of market. So let's say, for example, in India, let's call these players as A, B, and C. Okay. Now, each one of them is dependent on the other for pricing, right? A cannot go into the market and increase his pricing by 20%. Why? The moment he does this, the subscribers are going to run from A to B and C, and he will lose all the business, right? On the contrary, when he reduces his price by 20%, because the services which B and C provide are homogeneous, okay? Homogeneous in the sense that they're very close substitute of each other. So if he reduces the price by 20%, then B and C also don't have an option but to reduce the price if they want that all their customers should stay with them. So in the sense, what happens is that the business model, the price, the output of one firm is dependent on the other, right? Now, oligopoly, depending on situation, can be further differentiated. One can be on the basis of product. So if the product which these people sell, these firms sell, is homogeneous, we call this as perfect oligopoly. Whereas if the product is not homogeneous, this is known as imperfect oligopoly. Right? Similarly, if all these three players decide that we are going to increase or decrease the price together, they are basically being collusive. And this gives rise to a collusive oligopoly, a situation wherein the few firms who are already dominant players are controlling the market get together, collide with each other to increase or decrease the price and output. Whereas if they are competing against each other, then this is the case of a non-collusive oligopoly.